We're going to look at some of those promises that we receive as we follow Jesus this morning. And we're also going to see that whenever we receive a blessing, that God gives us a blessing, no blessing goes uncontested. But we're going to see a way that we can make sure that we keep hold of, take hold of, and enjoy everything that God has for us. Our reading comes from the book of Genesis, and it focuses on one of the key families in the people of God. And the thing is with these stories is that they're not over-romanticized. They're not whitewashed. These are real people facing real scenarios, and they're responding probably in the ways that you and I would respond as we face them as well. And the good news about that is that God interacts with normal people. He interacts with real people, and most importantly, he blesses real people. And so we're going to have a look at this. This is Genesis chapter 25, starting at verse 19. And you can follow along on the screens. This is the account of the family line of Abraham's son, Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, and sister of Laban, the Aramean. Now, those are, if you carry on reading the story later on, those are all kind of key characters that add something, but we're not going to get to them today. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the elder will serve the younger." When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau, which is actually a pun. There's a lot of puns going on in this. And after this, his brother came out and with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob, another pun. One of the lessons, kind of parenting lessons from this is, however funny you think it would be to name your child in like a pun, it's not that funny and gets less and less funny as they grow up, as we'll see. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home amongst the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And here we have the scene set for a family feud that is worthy of any soap opera. So we see, once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, famished. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." This is also why he was called Edom. Jacob replied, "First, sell me your birthright." "Look, I'm about to die," Esau said. "What good is a birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew, and he ate and drank and got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. Amen. God has a purpose for your life. And it's an invitation to three things. It's an invitation to relationship, to worship, and to stewardship. To enjoy the relationship of a friendship with God and a friendship with his people. To worship, to give God the glory he deserves, and stewardship, to look after the things that he's put in your hands, your time, your gifts, your talents. And this has been the call all throughout humanity's history. From the very beginning, God said to Adam and Eve, fill the world, go forth and multiply, fill the world, rule it and subdue it. It's relationship, it's worship, it's stewardship. And even though things go wrong, he keeps repeating this invitation all through the Old Testament. And it comes to us in the form of Jesus' last command to us before he leaves and goes into heaven. It's known as the Great Commission. He says this, Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you to the end of the age. It's relationship, it's worship, it's stewardship. In your baptism, you discover whose you are in relationship. You discover why you are in worship, and you discover what you are as you steward the things that God has given you. These are incredible blessings, and we receive them as we follow Jesus. But what we encounter in life and what we see in this story is that no blessing goes uncontested. No blessing goes uncontested. And what we tend to find is that the challenge is most intense in the area in which you are most called. Like the background to this story is that this calling lands in Abraham and Sarah's life in the command to have a big family, and out of that family, kings and leaders are going to come. And yet they, and nearly every generation afterwards, then struggle to conceive, and then they struggle to parent their kids. They struggle to have the big family, and then they struggle to create the leaders and to parent the leaders that they are supposed to do. The challenge is most intense in the area in which we are most called. And they start off in this story by responding quite well. So they Isaac and Rebekah, they struggled to conceive, something totally out of their control. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. They struggle, there is a challenge, and so they seek the Lord in the areas that they are out of control in. But they also struggle in areas they are in control in. This area of parenting. I say you're in control. You're in control to a certain degree. Why is this happening? Rebekah asked. So she went to inquire of the Lord. They both start by responding really well. When you face a challenge, inquire of the Lord. But afterwards, this basically goes downhill. They stop doing that, and things get messy very quickly. See, when a challenge comes, the problem is we tend to get muddled up in those three promises. We're supposed to receive our relationship, give our worship, and steward our gifts. But what we see is Isaac worships what he's supposed to be stewarding. Jacob works to earn the relationship he's been given. And Esau, he takes for granted that which he should be eternally grateful for, and he doesn't worship the living God. Now, this story is preserved for us. It's given to us as a warning. We see these same challenges land in the life of every leader in the Old Testament, and you probably recognize this challenge in yourself. Like it's been said that those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. It's also been added that those who do study history are doomed to stand by helplessly whilst everyone else repeats it. But that doesn't have to be the case. And as we look at this, as we think about it, as we receive it in community, it means that we can take hold of every blessing that God has for us and not miss out on anything that he wants us to receive. So let's have a look at it. First of all, you have Isaac, who worships what he's supposed to steward. We read this. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Kate and I, my wife, we have twin girls, and sometimes it feels like we're living out like the female version of this story. We struggled to conceive. We then had twins. One's very hairy, the other's totally bald. She's just working on her eyelashes, and they jostle, as you can see in this photo. They jostle over everything. And the hardest thing that I've found with having twins is trying to remain like equal in my compliments. Sometimes I'm like overwhelmed with delight in one of them, and I'll just be like, "You are the most beautiful girl in the entire world," as are you. And I have to do that with every compliment. Basically, the book of Genesis has slightly psyched me out, because if there's one parenting lesson you can take from the book of Genesis, it's that if you do have a favorite child, you pay them no favors by showing favoritism. Like, it totally ruins everything. Isaac worships his stomach. Like, food is a good gift, but to Isaac, it's a god. And so he worships his stomach, and so he prefers the son that brings him the food that he likes. The literal translation is, for the game in his mouth, he loved his son Esau. And it's a brilliant poetic picture there, because it's unclear whether it's Isaac's mouth or whether it's Esau's mouth. And it's probably both. It's for the game in Isaac's mouth that we were created to worship God. But when you stop worshiping the Creator and you worship the created, you exchange God's glory for the glory of created things. And you become less of what you're supposed to be. He's supposed to be a king type figure. And here he's got game in his mouth. It's like he's being fed like an animal. And Esau is supposed to be the heir to this, and he's like a predator with game in his mouth, and that's why Isaac loves him. When you start to worship created things, we demean ourselves and other people. This is what the favoritism flows out of. Love of a father is supposed to be based on the characteristic of the father's love. That we are loved because we are loved because we are loved. But by showing favoritism here, he's basically saying, I love you because you're lovely. I love you based not on the character of my love, but on the character of your loveliness. And it causes all sorts of problems. God does it the other way around. He doesn't love us because we're lovely. He loves us so that we would become lovely. Now, as he favors this one son, ironically, it hurts both. Because to the unfavored, it says, you need to earn my love. But to the favored, it says, there's a chance that you could lose this love. And so we see what's birthed into this family. He's supposed to be stewarding his family, stewarding the family business. And instead, because he likes this food and he worships his stomach, he unleashes disaster in a form of a competition into his family. Isaac worships what he should steward. And so Esau ends up taking for granted that which he should be grateful for. He doesn't worship the living God. There's a parable that can help us understand what happened in the life of Esau. It's a quite well-known parable. It's not a parable from the Bible. In fact, it starts a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's the parable of the Death Star. For those of you who haven't seen Star Wars, spoiler alert, although it's been 42 years, keep up. The Death Star is this enormous spaceship that's so powerful it can destroy planets. And whenever it turns up in the solar system, everyone it's against is afraid. And it's there's no hope for us. And everyone on the side of the Death Star is like, we're going to win. There is nothing that can stop us, nothing that we cannot do. Now, the problem with the Death Star is, however invincible it looks, it has a fatal, quite significant, to be fair, design flaw that's only sort of back explained in recent films. But basically, there's a small hole that if the rebels fire a small missile into it, it will go all the way to its core and blow the core up, and the whole thing will explode. This great strength has a great weakness, and if it's exploited, it will explode. And the reason, and basically this happens not just once, but twice in the Star Wars films. Again, failure to learn from history. But really, every Star Wars film is just a retelling of that story. That this great strength has a great weakness. And it's so popular because it resonates with us. We know that it's true. We've all know of great leaders on the world stage or in our lives, great leaders who, when they turn up, it seems like we can do anything. When they're there, everyone follows. When they're there, the task is going to get done. They are invincible. But then they have this weakness that when it's exploited, they explode. They have a Death Star, character Death Star moment. And maybe you've seen that. Maybe you've seen that on the world stage or in your life. And sometimes it's just a small explosion. Someone loses their temper and it's like bang. Or sometimes it's a bigger explosion and relationships are lost. Jobs are lost. The fallout is a lot bigger. Esau is one of those leaders. He has a character explosion. We read in verse 27, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country. He looks so impressive. I'm kind of thinking Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. Like, he's got muscles, he's broad, he's got a bow and arrow on his back. And of course he's lived into this. His dad idolizes food, so of course he would become a hunter. But the problem is, the aim on his life is to steward the inheritance. That when his father dies, he'll become head of the family. He'll manage the family business. He'll look after the land. But instead, he's out chasing wild animals. He's not stepped into the calling of his life. Now, an explosion happens in a moment. But the build-up to it happens step by little step leading up to that moment. See, the Death Star was built on a fatal flaw, and Esau is building his life on this fatal flaw of not taking his birthright seriously. Part of his birthright is to worship the living God, and yet he manages to break every rule that has been given in the Bible up to this point. I mean, we're only 25 chapters in. This is quite hard. You can imagine, like, Isaac telling him about the family story and saying to him one day, do you know what? Our family was quite dysfunctional. And he's like, hold my beer. Like Adam, he eats forbidden food. Like Cain, he wants to kill his brother. Like Lamech, he takes multiple wives. Like Nimrod, he builds a wicked empire built on taking power. And like the sons of God, he intermarries. He breaks every single rule. And in doing so, he's building his life on this foundation of sand. And so when the explosion comes, he's totally not prepared for it. And we read, once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country famished. It's like, how many times has Esau sort of stumbled in like this? And Jacob's like, he's playing it cool. He's like, oh, I just happened to be ready, happened to be cooking my brother's favorite food by the door as he comes in. It's like, we live in a dangerous world. The world is not entirely for you. You have an enemy that seeks to devour you. You have to keep your wits about you. But Esau doesn't do that. He doesn't even attempt to do that. He just comes in, he's like, I need some of this red stuff. He doesn't even give it the right name. He's just like, red stuff. He's in such a hurry. And he says, I want to gulp it down. It's words used for how animals eat. He's wild, he's impulsive, he's emotive, he's impatient. On the Myers-Briggs, he's the ESTP, whilst Jacob is a JERK. And so he sees his moment. He sees his moment, and Jacob replies, first, sell to me your birthright. Esau's wild and emotive. Jacob is cold and calculating, and he catches Esau on the back foot. In fact, I don't know if this is possible. It's kind of like he catches him on two back feet. There's two things that means he's off guard. First of all is his condition. We are embodied creatures. And that means we don't make great decisions when we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. If you're any of those things, do what the acrostic spells, halt. Halt. Don't start that discussion with your spouse beyond 10 o'clock. It's not going to go well. Don't make that investment decision on something you just saw on Instagram whilst you were hungry. Like, it's not going to go well. We're not in a great condition. Don't make strong and important decisions. But the other back foot is Esau's situation. We are cultural creatures. We are really a big determining factor in how we behave is, what is everyone else doing? What is the situation I'm in? He's supposed to be thinking about the household, but instead he's off hunting. He's supposed to be thinking about worship, but instead he's chasing wild animals. He's not in a scenario that's going to help him to take hold of what God has for him. Being on an adrenaline high doesn't help you think that well and clearly about the future. What's your open country? What's the place where you are more likely to sell yourself short, to settle for less than God has given you? Where you're more likely to make the lesser choice than the bolder choice? Because in the open country, in the wilderness of the open country, that's where we're going to feel like Esau. We're going to feel like we don't have enough. We don't have what we need. This is the hard season of marriage, the nightmare project at work, the long-term illness, These are all open country moments where we're tempted to say with Esau, well, what good is my birthright to me? But the good news is that Jesus has a track record of providing abundance in the wilderness. Abundance in the wilderness. But as I said, Esau doesn't get this. He says, look, I'm about to die. What good is the birthright to me? Everything feels urgent to him. Like, it's not urgent. He's going to live for another 40 years. Like, if he was going to die, Jacob would have given him the stew. He'd just watched him die and then eaten the stew as well as taking his inheritance. Like, this is our inner teenager that's like, if I don't have a girlfriend, I'm going to die. If I don't have branded tracksuit bottoms, I'm going to die. Like, he's just a man of the moment. And if you're a man of the moment, you can't push through your breaking points because pain finds its purpose when you have vision. Without vision, pain has no purpose, and so you just sell yourself short rather than taking hold of what God has for you in the future. Like he says, what good is this birthright to me? Like he's literally only valuing what there is in the now. In the now. He fails to see anything of future value. It's the short-term hit over the long-term goal. Like he gets called Edom after this, which means red. Like being born like red and ruddy is a sign of strength, but it's now like, you know when someone at school does something slightly silly and then they get a nickname, it stays with them forever. This is that moment. He's called Edom because he sells his birthright for a bowl of stew. And not only for him and his life, like his descendants get called the Edomites. This has generational impact. This would be like if in 100 years from now, they're calling the English the Brexitamites. Like it's like he just can't see beyond the moment. And so he gets called Edom. They get called the Edomites. Jacob then gives Esau some bread and some lentil stew. And this is the wah, wah moment. Like, it's like, all the way through, it's been ambiguous as to what this stew is. It's called just red or stew. And basically, Esau thinks it's meat or it's blood stew, something that's forbidden to him. Again, another rule he's trying to break. And then he gets it, and it's wah, wah, it's lentil stew. He's basically cooked dal for him, which is great. But it's not worth your birthright. It's like he thought he was getting the steak, and instead he's getting the vegan meat substitute. He thought he was getting the burger from the advert, and instead it's the oily bap in the bottom of the bag that gets delivered. Sin promises life, but all it delivers up is sort of limp death. It promises a 3-course meal, but what you get is just sand, and it's all over in a moment. We read he ate, he drank, he got up, he left, he despised his birthright. He went for the short-term hit over the long-term blessing. He's literally eaten his inheritance. As a rule, it's never good to sacrifice your future for the present. In fact, everything we really value in life is gained by doing the reverse of sacrificing the present in study, exercise, saving, practice to gain the blessings of the future. The comedy example of this is from The Simpsons, where Homer one time drinks a pint of mayonnaise and vodka, and when somebody questions the wisdom of that, he says, "That's a problem for future Homer." Man, I don't envy that guy. Where are you tempted to trade your future for today? Where are you tempted? What's the bowl of lentils for you? In the Old English, it was called a mess of pottage. You could have everything, but you trade it for a mess of pottage. What is the stew that is tempting for you? Like, part of the reason this story is given to us is to flag this for us so that we don't make the same mistake. In the book of Hebrews, like Esau was supposed to be like one of these people we talk about. When we speak of the God of Jacob, it was supposed to be the God of Esau. But now Esau just ends up as sort of a footnote in the New Testament. But one time he gets mentioned, it's in the book of Hebrews, and it says this: "See that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his birthrights as the older son. Afterwards, as you know, he wanted to inherit this blessing. He was rejected. Even though he sought the blessing with tears, he could not change what he had done." What's your open country? What's your bowl of stew? Because knowing that, having that bit of self-knowledge is part of seeing to it that we don't make the same mistake and miss out on the blessing God has for us. Esau fails to be grateful for what he should be eternally grateful. He doesn't worship the living God. But Jacob works for that which was a gift. He works for that which was a gift. The actor Ray Romano from the show Everyone Loves Raymond was in a film. And in this film, his character had to say the lines, "I love you." And just before he's about to say the line, he kind of chokes. And there's a really awkward pause, and then he delivers the line. And it made it into the film. And a journalist in an interview asked him about it. And this is what he said. He said, "I grew up never hearing 'I love you' from my father. So it doesn't flow from my mouth either. My brother and I played on the same softball team, and we had a hard time even high-fiving each other. I always say that if my father hugged me once, I'd be an accountant right now." Every child longs to hear, "You are my beloved child with whom I am well pleased." Those words that the Father speaks over Jesus as he is baptized. Every child longs to hear it from their Father. And if they don't hear it, they spend their life chasing after it. That's what Jacob does. Like, it's no surprise. Like, Isaac worships food, so his older brother becomes a hunter. Jacob becomes a master chef. He's chasing after these words. He's chasing after. He's literally born holding on to the foot of his brother, trying to get his blessings. And the sad thing is, God has already given him more. He strives to earn what is already his. And it makes things worse. The blessing is relationship, but it's now 2 decades till he talks to his brother again. The blessing is stewardship, but he gets driven off the family estate because of his behavior. The irony is that God's already said, "This is yours." So you've got Esau trying to sell what isn't his, and Jacob trying to buy what he already owns. It messes things up. This is us when we try and earn God's love. This is us when we try and work for God's favor. Do you know what? God says, "I love you because I love you because I love you." He doesn't say, "Do this and then I'll love you." Because if it was like that, it would be, whatever you strive to attain, you sustain by striving as well. And God doesn't want that. He doesn't want slaves. He doesn't want servants. He wants kids. And so he gives it to us. He gifts this relationship to us. And Jacob doesn't get it. So he tries to take by force what the Lord has given to him by grace. We read, "Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank and got up and left." What you end up here is with Jacob sort of lives out a reverse communion. It's like a reverse Lord's Supper. There's a table and there's a family and there's some bread and there's some red stuff, but it doesn't do what the Lord's Supper does. It doesn't unite the family, it divides it. It doesn't give a blessing, it takes a blessing. And most importantly, the wine is missing. The wine is missing. Wine in communion symbolizes joy. The bread is the food for the beginning of the day to sustain us, but wine is the symbol of the work is done. It is finished. There's nothing more for you to add. Time to put up your feet because it's the end of the day. It's wine time. But at Jacob's table, the wine is missing. The wine is missing. It's easy to think that that's the table that God invites us to. That he invites us to a table to trick us, to take from us, to add tasks to our to-do list. But that is not the truth. If we seek the Lord, as Rebecca seeks the Lord, you see, actually, it's the opposite. See, really, this is a story about exchanges. Exchanges. Isaac exchanges the glory of God for the glory of living things. Esau exchanges his birthright for a bowl of stew. And Jacob exchanges his security for striving. But do you know what? The moral of the story isn't be like any of those. Actually, it's the hint at a greater exchange that is mentioned at the beginning when it says the older will serve the younger. Because yes, that is talking about Esau. He will serve Jacob. But ultimately it's a promise that the older will serve the younger. Because when Jesus came, he is our older brother. And he came not to be served, but he came to serve. That he came and Jesus, in a greater exchange, exchanged all of heaven so that he could get you. See, in that passage in Hebrews, it says this: Esau, who for a single meal sold his birthright. But at the start of that passage, it says this: Jesus, who for the joy set before him, endured the cross. Esau gives up on his birthright, but Jesus endures it and he takes it. And what is that joy? That joy is that he gets all of his Esau's back. He gets all of those who've exchanged the glory of God for living things, he gets them back. All of those who've exchanged their eternal birthright, he gets them back. And all of those who are striving for a relationship with God, he says, no, you can come home and you can be in the family, and it's gifted, not earned. As we fix our eyes on Jesus, we see he shows us how to worship and how to steward by fixing our eyes on the joy on the other side of the cross over whatever challenge you're going through, knowing that if Jesus came to bring life and we put him to death and still life endured, he can overcome any situation you face. But most importantly, he shows us how to do this relationship. Because when he returned to the throne room of heaven, we don't read that he bowed down. We don't read that he continued to serve. We read that he sat down next to the throne of his Father, because it is finished. The work is done. It's wine time. This is the time for joy. Jesus shows us how to worship. He shows us how to steward. And most important of all, he shows us how to enjoy a relationship with God. Amen.